Good morning. The first item of business is general questions. At question number 1, I call Katie Clark.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the decision by Strathclyde Partnership for Transport to progress with proposals for bus franchising.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. We very much welcome the work that Strathclyde Partnership for Transport has undertaken to update the regional bus strategy, given the importance of the bus sector to their region. It's right that local transport authorities explore how best to use the measures in the Transport Scotland Act 2019, as our approach is to enable them to determine what is best to improve their services, and Transport Scotland will continue to engage with all stakeholders, including SPT. Work on the franchising guidance is ongoing, and we will be sharing that with the NZ Committee along with the affected parties prior to finalisation and formal publication.
Katie Clark.
Since 2006, there has been a 44% decrease in the number of bus routes across Scotland, with 190 routes being cut in the last year alone. Over 83% of passengers support Strathclyde Partnership for Transport's implementing bus franchising across the region, which would allow for better oversight of fares, routes and timetables. So what work is the Scottish Government doing to ensure that SPT have the necessary financial support to enable them to proceed with franchising?
Minister.
The Scottish Government continues to work with SPT, as I said in my original answer. There are a number of phases that they will have to go through. Once we have the guidance cleared, we will present that to the NZ Committee, and then it will be up to SPT to come back to us to talk about what they need to do next.
Jamie Hepburn.
Many constituents contact me regarding the decline in service offered by the main commercial bus operators in Cumbernauld and Forsyth, and that includes in taking over 2 hours to be and to ensure they're at their work in Glasgow by 9 AM. Can the Minister set out what opportunities the new powers for local authorities that SPT are utilising, what they present for returning to a more comprehensive bus network and promoting public transport use?
Minister. Well, the bus powers within the Transport Scotland Act enable local transport authorities to determine the provision of services, the routes, the frequency of those services, as well as the fare structures that should be in place and the type of vehicles that should be used on local roads. So while we want all local transport authorities to be able to improve their bus services, it is for them to decide what the powers, if any, are best to address the transport challenges in their individual areas.
Question number 2, Ariane Burgess.
To ask the Scottish Government what scoping work it has undertaken regarding electrifying and dualling the Highland Main Line.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
Network Rail, instructed by Transport Scotland, investigated options to electrify the Highland Main Line. This work contributed to developing our plans to replace ScotRail's intercity fleet of trains, which I announced to Parliament in December 2024. As I said in the debate led by the member last week, we are firmly committed to electrifying our railways. Projects already delivered are underway, like Edinburgh to Glasgow, Barrhead and East Kilbride, and our recently announced plans for the phased electrification of Fife and Border routes are evidence of this commitment. A refreshed rail decarbonisation action plan will be published during this parliamentary term, and it will specify how we are going to achieve phased decarbonisation of our rail network by 2045. I appreciate there are potential improvements to be secured in dualling the Highland Main Line. However, there are currently no active projects underway.
Ariane Burgess.
I appreciate the Cabinet Secretary for that response. My interest in particular is in the Highland Main Line, and as long as 17 years ago, the Scottish Government promised rail passengers that they would cut journey times between Inverness and Perth by half an hour. In the intervening 17 years, just 4 minutes have been saved because this Government has not prioritised rail with its spending. What will the Cabinet Secretary do to fulfil the broken promise and provide speedy, reliable rail for people in the Highlands?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think the member is incorrect. Indeed, rail constitutes the vast bulk of my budget compared to other transport modes. Indeed, rail is over £1.5 billion a year, and trunk roads and roads issues are about £1 billion. So I think it's incorrect to characterise the Scottish Government's funding that way. And indeed, the extensive announcements I've made both on procurement and also electrification that have been welcomed, particularly in the Borders and Fife, is testament to our commitment to rail.
Question number 3, Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the house building statistics for Scotland quarterly update, new house building and affordable housing supply to end June 2025.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McCallum.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government recognises the challenges that are set out in the latest housing statistics. That's why we've increased the 25-26 housing budget to £808 million. When we did this in September, when we doubled our funding for acquisitions to £80 million under the Housing Emergency Action Plan. This will help to acquire family homes now to relieve very evident pressure. We're also committing up to £4.9 billion over the coming 4 years, which is a major increase, and uptick in delivery will follow.
Mark Griffin.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. But in 2018, Scotland saw 23,337 housing starts. This year, it's just 15,104, a 35% collapse. Social starts are at their lowest level since 1997, when we started publishing these statistics. Now, since 2018, 3,435 more children have ended up in temporary accommodation, and tragically 1,188 more people have died homeless. How will the Cabinet Secretary and the Government reverse this devastating trend? And does the Government have a target date for ending the use of hotels and bed and breakfasts as temporary accommodation for children?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, temporary accommodation and the availability of it is a vital safety net in Scotland's housing and homelessness legislation, but it ought to be just that. It ought to be temporary. The actions that we've taken to date, not least the delivery of 140,000 affordable homes since we came to government, over 100,000 of which have been for social rent, that has meant that in Scotland, proportionately, we have access to 47% more affordable homes per head than in England, and 73% more than in Wales. Despite that, Mark Griffin's quite right, there is considerable strain in the system. I don't want to see any children spending time longer in temporary accommodation than they need to, and that's why, on the 2nd of September, our Housing Emergency Action Plan committed to a number of actions to turn around this trend, including setting out multi-annual funding for affordable homes, setting out a record investment over the coming years in affordable homes, and other changes, including in the planning system, so that it facilitates the change that we're determined to see.
Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I have to say it's with some nerve that Mark Griffin can stand here and criticise the Scottish Government's action on tackling Scotland's housing emergency, when the last Labour administration of 2003 to 2007 dismally completed only 6 council homes, lacking crucial innovation and collaboration with local authorities. Can the Cabinet Secretary please advise how the Scottish Government's ambitious investment in voids and acquisitions will empower local authorities to replenish pre-existing house stock to create permanent homes for hundreds of families across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, and I very much welcome the question and the context, because as well as setting out the new affordable homes that we've delivered since coming to government, which sets us apart in the United Kingdom, it's also important to use the stock that we have just now to better use. So Rona Mackay asks about voids and acquisitions. Since declaring a national housing emergency, we have brought almost 1,000 homes into affordable use between 24 and 25, and that was through £40 million of targeted investments in acquisitions and in turning empty social voids back into use. On the 2nd of September, in that emergency plan that I mentioned, we have doubled the fund to £80 million. And I've asked councils to go out now to use that money to acquire homes on the market, family homes, because these are the ones that will be needed to get children out of temporary accommodation. Do it now, relieve the pressure, and we'll invest in home building at the same time.
Question number 4, Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government, in light of it being Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Week, what financial progress has been made against its 2021-22 programme for government commitment to double its investment in sport to £100 million by the end of the current parliamentary session?
Minister Marie Todd.
The Scottish Government's Women and Girls in Sport Week campaign aims to increase the visibility of women and girls in sport, highlight opportunities to get involved and discuss barriers and drivers to participation. The 25-26 budget underlines our ongoing commitment to sport and active living by protecting the investment despite a challenging economic background. We recognise the significant impact that spending on sport and physical activity makes in delivering health outcomes, and doubling the investment into sport and active living during this parliamentary term remains the ambition of the Scottish Government.
Liz Smith.
The Minister will understand that the 2021 programme for government commitment by the SNP to double the investment to £100 million substantially raised the hopes of Scotland's sporting bodies, who have obviously been struggling with resource issues for years. So it's little wonder that they are aghast when they see the figures in the revised autumn budget coming in at around £40 million if you take the Sport Scotland spending at £35 million and just under £5 million for the Active Healthy Living programme. And worse still, when they see that 40 million figure is down on the 2021-22 revised autumn budget of £44.5 million. So can I ask the SNP ministers, will they honour that 2021 commitment that they made in their programme for government?
Minister.
So let me assure the member and the Parliament as a whole that we meet regularly with sports governing bodies, and we absolutely recognise the challenging situation that they are facing, worsened, frankly, by some of the decisions in Westminster, like the Employers' National Insurance, which has added strain to a sector that, as Liz Smith acknowledges, was already in difficulty. Now, it remains our ambition to maintain, to double that budget. We have one more budget to go before the end of this term of Parliament. I'd be very, very hopeful that the Scottish Conservatives, unlike last year, who didn't find it in their hearts possible to vote for the nearly £50 million investment in sport, would find it in their hearts not just to support the budget and maintain that investment, but actually to negotiate to increase it. That would be very great.
Question number 5, Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what rights patients have when their local medical centre has been deemed unfit for purpose by their NHS board.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Are responsible for ensuring the provision of primary medical services in their area. My officials are working with all health boards to develop a whole system NHS infrastructure investment plan. A key part of this planning will be the development of an investment strategy for primary care, considering both priorities and delivery models. And spending on primary medical services by this government has increased over the past decade, both in cash and real terms. In cash terms, spending has gone from £763 million in 2013-14 to almost £1.1 billion in 2023-24.
Alec Crowley.
Presiding Officer, according to NHS 5, the initial agreement document for new purpose-built community health and wellbeing centres in Lochgelly and Kincardine was approved by the Scottish Government in January 2020. In 2021, the then Health Secretary, in answer to a question from Annabel Ewan about Lochgelly, told this Parliament, and I quote, "I give the member an absolute confirmation that when we have the outline business case, the funding will be made available." Early 2023, NHS 5 stated the current Lochgelly and Kincardine health centres are older facilities which no longer meet the needs of the local population. Can the Cabinet Secretary understand the level of anger and despair that there is in communities in Lochgelly and in Kincardine when they've been promised time and time again that they would have replacements for these unfit for purpose health centres?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Alec Rowley for setting that out. Yes, I do understand it because I've met with local residents in Lochgelly and in Kincardine at the request of both Ms Ewing and Ms Somerville, the constituency representatives, highlighting the concerns that Mr Rowley has set out. Our capital position is paused, other than the areas that have been set out in the budget, because of the pressure on our capital budget due to decisions taken out with our control and because of construction inflation. We are in touch with the likes of NHS 5 and all boards in order to get their capital prioritisations, and we hope that we will see greater capital investment coming from the UK budget to allow us to do more within the primary care system.
Brief supplementary, Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In fact, NHS 5 has just said that a new medical centre for Lochgelly will in fact be in its top 3 priority projects for capital funding from the Scottish Government. Does the Cabinet Secretary therefore agree that it must surely be Lochgelly's turn now?
Cabinet Secretary.
Much appreciate the work that Annabel Ewing has done to advance the case for the Lochgelly Medical Centre. Obviously, I hear what she has said around NHS Fife's prioritisation. In terms of the capital allocation, she will understand that will be determined based on the allocation that we receive from the UK Government at the budget and the work that is being carried out regarding the spending review and the infrastructure investment plan. But my wish is to see much greater investment going into the capital estate for primary care services and to see the likes of Lochgelly, Kincardine and others seeing development happen.
Question number 6, Jackson Carlaw.
To ask the Scottish Government what engagement it has had with Glasgow City Council regarding its proposals for an at-city boundary congestion charge and a toll on the Clyde Tunnel.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
The Scottish Government has not held specific discussions with Glasgow City Council regarding any potential at-city boundary charge, nor regarding any toll charge for use on the Clyde Tunnel.
Jackson Carlaw.
Well, I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary might urgently do so, because my Eastwood constituents would be unfairly charged by the SNP-run council every time they cross the local authority boundary by car for work, university, college, family and social reasons. In effect, every time they went to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital for essential medical care, they would be charged for crossing the city boundary. Moreover, if every other local authority followed suit, we would effectively have a series of custom posts all over Scotland, with people being charged every time they crossed a city boundary or a council boundary anywhere in Scotland. This would be a disaster for the economy and a completely unrealistic and unfair burden on motorists.
Cabinet Secretary.
So my understanding was that the Conservatives wanted to have more decentralisation and more powers for council, but obviously he now wants
the Cabinet Secretary.
He wants me to step in on an issue that should best be resolved between East Renfrewshire Council and Glasgow Council. Now, I would remind the member that there is existing legislation. It goes back to 2001 from the Labour and then Labour executive for the road user charging powers. It's up to local authorities to make decisions. They want to manage their own road space. They want to manage their own maintenance. They want to manage their own congestion. And if he doesn't believe that local authorities should be in charge of their own authorities, then perhaps there's more divisions in the Conservative parties than we even realised.
Question number 7, Mark Crossgill.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the proposed ferry route between Rosyth and Dunkirk.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government continues to support the development of our ports and the potential for a new direct freight and passenger ferry service linking Scotland to Europe. Ministers and officials have met with the sponsors on a number of occasions regarding their proposal to introduce a new ferry route between Rosyth and Dunkirk. The Scottish Government is continuing to engage with the sponsors on a variety of issues. But as the member is aware, an obstacle is the border control post requirements which were brought in due to the UK exiting the EU. Now, whilst the Scottish Government welcomes the recent announcement of an outlined SPS agreement between the UK and the EU, until an agreement is finalised, it is impossible for the Scottish Government to provide certainty about the future border control post requirements. But officials are continuing to discuss these and other matters with the sponsors.
Mark Crossgill.
Can I thank the Minister for that response? But he'll be aware that before the summer recess, the First Minister gave assurances that his government would welcome the ferry route and would do everything that we can to remove any obstacles that are in the way. But 4 months on, the biggest barrier remains the border control post designation. I believe that that is resolvable. The ferry is a significant opportunity for the local community, the Scottish economy and for our connection to Europe. So can I ask the Minister, how will the Government support the delivery of this ferry in the coming months? Because time is ticking away. We will lose this ferry. We will lose this direct connection to Europe. We cannot afford to lose this opportunity. And I think the First Minister knows that as well.
Minister.
Mark Ruskell makes very light of border control posts. I think he should not be making very light of border control posts because of the job that they actually do for preserving Scotland's preserving our public health and animal health. But the Scottish Government remains absolutely convinced that Scotland's future is best served by being in the EU, and we remain committed to seeking to achieve that. Improving our transport and trade links with the European mainland is arguably even more important and has even more resonance after the UK's damaging exit from the EU. But while the Scottish Government welcomes the recent announcements of the SPS agreement between the UK and the EU, until an agreement is finalised, it is not possible to confirm what future Board of Control post requirements will be, and the Scottish Government officials are continuing to liaise with the sponsor, and I have asked for a meeting directly with the sponsor myself.